Today is August 11th, 2016, the first occurrence of a new holiday in Japan, Mountain Day. Yay! Totally unrelated to that, Mulele and I don't have a new Critiquing Comics for today. Well, unrelated except for the mountains of other stuff that have kept us too occupied to get the podcast done. By the way, one thing that hasn't exactly been a mountain lately is submissions of listener comics. Let us critique yours. Send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. Anyway, thought you would enjoy hearing the very first time we critiqued a listener's comic, long before we spun the idea off as Critiquing Comics. You'll hear Mulele and me discussing it, and then I continue the discussion with Brandon. This is Deconstructing Comics 97 from October 15th, 2007. You can see the comic we're discussing at deconstructingcomics.com/kidintense. Enjoy.
Yeah, it's nice. I'm ordering some fries.
Okay, we'll get a recording of you ordering fries.
Okay. フライドポテトを取って。はい。じゃあ、ありがとうございます。
Okay, this is Tim.
And Mulele.
This is Deconstructing Comics.
At Jonathan's in Asakadai.
We're not in Tokyo, yeah. And I'm eating, and Mulele is going to be eating, but today we are talking about, well, a couple of weeks ago we asked our listeners to send in their comics to evaluate, and one listener has sent us a few pages of his comic. The guy's name is Vincent Morris, if I'm reading his signature correctly, and his comic is called Kid Intense. It's a superhero comic. I haven't asked him if it's okay, but I think I'll be able to post some of these pages on our website at globalcomics.net, and you can take a look at what we're talking about. He didn't send us the whole story, so it's a little hard to evaluate it in terms of his plotting, but we promised we would be fair, and we did find some good things about this, as well as some constructive criticism to offer. So, first of all, what did you think about the art in general, his drawing ability?
I thought he had some interesting. I don't know if I could call them techniques quite yet, but some interesting ideas about anatomy and about posing. The art itself is, it has a lot of tricks that it uses, and these tricks are standard tricks from comics that you see other artists use. And I don't want to sound negative at all, because I don't really think it's a bad thing to have these tricks. I mean, these tricks are there for a reason, most likely to help people draw quickly so they can meet their deadlines. But it seems to me that you might not be sure why these tricks are there. And by tricks, I mean, for example, the buildings in the backgrounds having vertical lines to represent, I guess,
windows?
No, I was thinking more of an unclear skyline, or kind of a gray skyline, rather than
like a haze or something?
Like a haze, yeah.
Mm.
But in fact, behind the haze there are clouds, and you can see birds as well.
Mm.
The birds aren't quite birds, they're M's. But again, that's not a bad thing, that's a stylistic choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what I'm saying is, it's okay to use the trick, but know why the trick is there, or how the trick works exactly.
So don't make the buildings look fuzzy if you've got also clouds
Behind the buildings?
behind them and birds very clearly visible, yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's kind of a nitpicking. Some of the good things I really liked about the drawing is the anatomy of the main hero. Vincent has a firm grasp of anatomy. That's not quite what I mean to say. Vincent has a firm grasp of
How to draw anatomy?
the underlying concepts of anatomy. He kind of knows where the muscles go and how they should kind of bulk outward. Not all the muscles are drawn anatomically correctly, but I have a feeling that this is because he's not drawing from life, but actually drawing from action figures, which is actually considered in some circles a very legitimate practice. We have the wooden figure posing dolls, and that's basically what I see it as. And so that's actually kind of a good idea. But with the action figures, the anatomy is always super exaggerated. So sometimes it winds up looking a little bit unrealistic.
But this hero is very bulky. He looks like Schwarzenegger in his prime, and then some.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes you see people who don't know anatomy, they draw bulk on the arm, but it's like the guy's got 5 biceps or something. It's like, wait a minute, that's just kind of wrong. But in this case, it's clear. He has bicep muscle, he's got all the muscles in the right place, and everything's well represented and well proportioned. So in that sense, I'd say, yeah, the anatomy isn't there yet, but you've got the start of something good. I would say move away from the action figures and start looking at life, or at least start looking at like bodybuilding magazines to really get a sense of how the muscles move and where they're attached and how they look in different poses. But anatomy is one of those things you can study for your entire life and still not even understand it completely.
Okay. He seems to have a good grasp of storytelling, the timing of one panel to the next, and it flows quite well.
Yeah, that was actually quite surprising. Very natural. I'd say he's got a natural ability for storytelling, a natural knack for storytelling.
For storytelling and as a comic.
Yeah, his sense of timing is excellent. The amount of information per page is a little bit low.
Yeah, these pages are kind of horizontal. They seem to be. It seems like he sort of drew it with the computer screen in mind, which isn't a bad idea. It's something that I started to think maybe I should have done with Spider Hag. And like, for drawing a webcomic, I think, I've been continuing to read Rice Boy. Actually, I got caught up to where he is on page 270 something.
Nice.
But I really enjoy reading Rice Boy. But the thing is, every single page I have to scroll down to see the bottom of the page, and it gets a little tiresome. He's formatted that way because he's also put it out as a book. I found that he's publishing it through Lulu.
Yeah.
So if you're reading it in print, then that's not a problem. But if you're doing it as a webcomic, doing it this sort of horizontal way is a good idea.
Well, some of us have scroll buttons or scrollers on our mouse or mice. Is mice the plural of mouse if it's a computer mouse?
Maybe.
Or is it mouse?
It can be. I don't know if there's a convention on that. But thing is, I tend to read it while I'm flossing my teeth. So I have to keep, getting the floss off my finger to scroll down and then go to the next page. It's better if there's a lot of dialogue on the page, but
Man, I'm never touching your computer.
But I digress. But yeah, the flow from panel to panel in Kid Intense is nice, and the first few pages he's pretty good at varying either the sort of camera angle, the viewpoint, or at least like zooming in and out a bit. But as it goes on, it gets a little bit more monotonous in terms of it's straight on shots, and pretty much all kind of medium distance from the character. So I think Vincent needs to look at drawing from other angles, and not just horizontally but vertically, maybe looking down or up at the characters.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to take a second to point out that one panel in page 2. It's the first panel in page 2. It's a 3/4 shot where the hero is kind of looking down at a burglar, and he says, a bank robber. That shot is the only shot that is not straight on or from the side. And it's not necessarily the best shot, but it works kind of nicely because it kind of breaks up everything. Mm-hmm. And on that one page, you've got 3 distinct shots. Mm-hmm. Whereas on the other pages, you might have one shot repeated, or maybe 2 shots kind of trading alternating. Yeah, so in that, I think that's actually quite good, just to break up the action.
Yeah, so before we started recording, we were discussing what he might look at to sort of educate himself, or to try to copy from, or not necessarily copy, but as to influence his
where to
style.
Go from here.
Yeah, and what he might draw on to get ideas of other angles. I don't know, we talked about whether or not other comics would be a good place to go, or maybe he needs to look at, I don't know, photography, or...
Well, you can get both inspiration and actually sharpen your drawing chops in a variety of ways. In my mind, the best way is just to draw from life. I don't always do it. I don't always have access to, say, a woman with 38 double D breasts. If I got to draw that sort of thing, or a man with like a barrel chest or superhero type musculature. So, I mean, you're obviously going to be looking at bodybuilding magazines. I don't know, the internet's also a good place, although try not to get too distracted by that. I'll wind up looking for one reference thing and get hooked on YouTube or something.
But we've got the second DMZ trade here. I just kind of opened it at random and looking at the variety of angles. This is pages 80 and 81 of the second trade. It starts out with kind of a straight-on shot, and then the next shot is, well, not so much from above, but it's a wider shot. Then there's a far shot from above, and then a real close-up of a hand on his shoulder, and then a little bit further back, but it's from the front. So it's varying both distance from the subject and which direction we're looking at him from on a horizontal level, and also a little bit on the vertical level, especially that third shot from above. So, I mean, you depending on what comic it is, you could pick up some influence in that sense from other comics.
I think maybe a fair question to ask when you do look at comics.
Yeah, one's not enough. We're talking about ketchup.
Yeah. one of the things you should do when you're looking at comics, or basically looking at anything, when someone offers up a page with a shot that you like, or dislike even, ask yourself why. Why did they choose this shot? What made this shot work for them? And how can it work for me? Well, obviously it's more than one question, but ask yourself these things, and you'll start to discover what works and what doesn't work for you. Also, you'll be able to look at the comic and understand why that comic didn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I found, I guess really especially when we first, well, even before we started doing this podcast, just when we were having the class, and, you know, I generally tended to just read a comic and pay attention to the story and not really think about, you know, storytelling or angles or anything like that. But with the class and then doing the podcast, I started to pay a little bit more attention to that, or at least remind myself to do that sometimes and think about, you know, how the story is being told and whether it works or not.
Yeah. A couple of things on the Kid Intense comic. A couple of more things, I guess. A few points where there's an extreme close-up of, on the, I guess it's the second page?
Yeah, it's the first page of actual story. There's a cover and sort of a splash page, which is not really the beginning of the story yet. The story starts on page 2 as he's numbered it. But yeah, the fourth panel there is an extreme close-up of the hero's face. Okay. He's saying, what?
Yeah, so ask yourself why. It's not to say that you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong in giving an extreme close-up. But ask yourself why. And see what you come up with as answers.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, as I was doing comics, you know, in the 80s, and I think that I tended to do the same thing just because I was subconsciously thinking of comics that I had read and, you know, seen that technique used, and didn't really consciously think about, you know, maybe I should do this in this panel, or maybe I should do that. So just sort of, you know, without even consciously thinking about it, like, I've seen this in other places, so this is what I'm going to do in this similar situation in my story.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what he's doing also.
Yeah. But some of this stuff is also cumulative. So I went through, after I graduated anime school, back in, 95?
Wow.
Yeah. Tokyo Animator Gakuen. Tokyo Animator College in Tokyo.
Good place for it.
Yeah. Well, they have one in Osaka, too.
And it's called Tokyo Animation School?
No, it's called Osaka Animation School, but I think they're affiliated.
Okay.
Anyway, after I graduated that place, I sat down and wrote and drew a 75-page story based on someone's 10-page story. And my hopes were to get it published, but really looking back on it, it's not that good of a comic. Some interesting points. I was able to flesh out the characters a bit from the original story, and I was able to add a lot of reason and subtext to the story. But basically, the way I drew it, and when I showed it to the editors, they look at it and say, it's kind of okay. It doesn't really work up until this point. It was like page 55 or 60. From here, it suddenly gets good. What happened? So I went to America, I read a bunch of comics, and I came back. Started drawing again. It's like, yeah, it's like you're inspired. Sometimes inspiration is the point. But after having made those 75 pages, and even though they'll never see the light of day again, I had kind of gone up a notch. I kind of understood this kind of situation requires this kind of shot. This kind of emotion requires this kind of... The story kind of built up to, I think on page, like... I think it was page 73 and 74. Mm-hmm. Wait, did I really have an oddly paged comic? But anyway, it was like the last... It was the last full-page spread. It was leading up to the point where the main bad guy realized just how bad of a situation he was in. And I had was it a one-page or a two-page? No, it was actually a one-page shot of his head. Mm-hmm. And this expression of extreme shock on him. He just realized just how fucked a situation he's in. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was the point, that was the climax of the story, that one expression. My entire comic was riding on that, in my mind anyway. Unfortunately, the rest of the comic wasn't really readable up until that point. But,
so we get more ketchup.
Yeah, well, push the button. How? And, basically, I knew that I wanted... I wanted the reader to turn the page, see the full page panel, and I wanted the reader to realize, as he realized, what was going on. And I was hoping that the reader's face would echo the main character's face. But I just wanted the face. I didn't need anything else. There's no background, nothing. The page encompassed his head. That was it. And that's why I had the close-up. And it was the big moment. That's why it was a full page. It's the only splash page in there. And for me, it worked perfectly. And I think it would work for most people to do it that way if they had a full page to use like that. But in Japan, 75-page story, it's not so bad. In Japan, that's about a week's worth of work. But in America, that's what, a year?
75 pages? So that, if it's Marvel, that's about 3 issues.
3 issues? Okay. Well, anyway, 3 issues, 1/10 of a story arc, But
half a trade if there's 6 issues.
Yeah. But that was my reasoning for that shot. So when you do the same thing, you have an extreme close-up of Kid Intense saying, what? It should be, and mind you, he is called Kid Intense. It should be the most intense, freaked out, holy fucking shit, what the hell? Kind of reaction. Not that it's not, but see what else you can do with the shot.
Now, because my comic was pretty much all of my comics work in my entire life has been of a parody nature, and I didn't do it so much in the Spider Hag that's on the website, the more recent stuff. But what I often used to do, to be like over the top dramatic in sort of to be humorous, was to have such a close-up that you could only see like one of the person's eyes. It's basically, mostly just the eye and side of the head a little bit, and because the person was just so shocked, and then the next panel you see what they're looking at.
But wait a minute, how does that work for you? Because you draw eyes, it's just a dot. It's just a bigger dot.
Yeah.
Especially
in my 70s and 80s work, yeah.
I suppose that's also a part of the parody, though.
Yeah. Well, I guess in those days it was more part of my laziness, but although my excuse was that the art was being bad made it funnier.
Slacker style, man. That's the way to go.
Although thanks to Molele's class, I did improve my art a fair amount, and I have some characters who have like rather real-looking eyes, or at least they're not just dots.
Well, you just put some reason behind why they're dots.
Yeah, because, well, we talked about this before, but then it became a situation where some of the characters looked more sophisticated in terms of the drawing style than others did because of when they were created.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But they're populating the same comic at the same time.
Well, some of us are older than others in this world, and some of us are more sophisticated. I'm not saying
some of the older ones are more simply drawn.
Maybe. But anyway, yeah, Kid Intense is an interesting idea. I would like to see him really live up to his namesake and see something really intense. But for the 5 pages that we have, it was kind of an interesting ride. And I would like to see what Vincent can do with Kid Intense, let's say in a year or two. If he has 8 pages to do one entire story, what can he do?
Yeah.
Oh, and one thing that I said off podcast that I'll repeat now. It seems to me that Vincent is on the cusp. Now, we don't know the age of Vincent, but we assume by some of the content that he's provided that he's in his teens, maybe early teens. Sorry if you're not, Vincent. No offense.
Sorry if you're 35.
Yeah. But basically, Vincent is on the cusp. He is at the point where he can make a decision in his life. If he is in fact 13, 14, 15, he decides that he wants to be a comic book artist. If he studies through it, through high school, studies anatomy, starts drawing from life, asks himself why at every turn, then perhaps 18, 19, 20, he'll be a professional. But it's a turning point. Does he want to, or rather, do you want to do comics for a living? Or do you want to have a peaceful, prosperous life?
Yep, there's the dichotomy. There are the choices.
Yeah.
By the way, even Vincent, even if you are 35, keep in mind that I was going on 40 when I took Mullely's class and my comic did improve, so it's never too late.
Yeah, actually, it doesn't matter what age you are. Follow your passions. But what I'm saying is, for an artist, you're at the point where if you decide you want to be a serious comic book artist and you really dig superheroes, I'd say 3 to 5 years, you'll be there. If you study.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we see promise in this. Just needs more work on the things that we mentioned, like the camera angles, the anatomy.
Yeah, but I'd say the one ace that you have is your sense of timing.
Mm-hmm.
That is awesome stuff.
Yes, that was the thing that impressed me right off the bat.
Yeah. So, I guess that's kind of it. That's our, 30-minute review of Kid Intense.
Okay. Yeah, and Vincent, we'd like to see more of your stuff after you've studied some more and see how it's improved.
Yeah, hit us up with a new comic in 6 months or a year, and let us know what's going on. Anyway, thanks for sharing your comic. We really appreciate it. And,
and the rest of our listeners, if you've got a comic you'd like us to review, write me an email at podcast@globalcomics.net or through the email form on our site, globalcomics.net, and I can let you know how to send it to me, and we'll take a look at it. Or if you want to snail mail it to me, I can send you the snail mail address, and we'll look at it that way. So.
Now let's get Brandon's take on Kid Intense.
I don't think it's like a terrible thing, but I mean, it is. I think the skills. What was it that they wrote? Yeah. your storytelling technique needs improvement?
Oh, slave labor?
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah, needed to work on fundamentals or something.
Fundamentals, yeah. Fundamentals, I would say, is what needs to be worked on. I think the story is okay. I mean, it's not anything new. It is kind of funny. He's got little jokes here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we're looking at it as a parody of the superhero genre, I think it does a pretty good job of making fun of, at least the big two, the spandex superheroes,
Mm-hmm.
I was questioning why that costume. It looks very much like Superman's costume,
Mm-hmm.
except with a big yellow square in the middle or a rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't understand. Is that supposed to be an eye? Is that what that is for intense?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an eye, except the serifs are huge.
Like so big that you can't read the eye.
Yeah.
I think initially my suggestion would be with the character design
Mm-hmm.
to maybe rethink it a little bit. If he's serious about the character, if he really wants it to be a real character, and if it's not a parody, then he needs to redesign the costume altogether.
Mm.
But if he's making it a parody, then I think the costume design and its similarity to, Superman or whatever is okay, but you have to make the eye on his chest a little more legible, and perhaps closer even to the iconic S that's on Superman's chest.
Mm.
As far as an anatomy, an initial look at the anatomy isn't terrible. I mean, it looks like the muscle groups are kind of in the right place,
Mm-hmm.
and the general attempt is a fair attempt. His chest is a little bit too big, his torso is a little bit too long, his legs a little bit too short, and his head is tiny.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's a parody of the superhero genre, certainly in the 90s it would have been a valid commentary.
Yeah, the Rob Liefeld
Yeah, exactly.
style.
Right. He does a lot of things that I think a professional artist would do, but his attempt isn't quite up to the standard. He does a lot of foreshortening, which is good, and he's pushing himself there. You can tell.
Mm-hmm.
He's varying the angle of the. Unfortunately, when he's drawing his character, there's only like two views of the face, and sometimes it looks like he just kind of traced the face over from one to the next.
Mm.
Like on page 3, the bottom panel, where we see the hero Kid Intense flying towards the page,
Mm-hmm.
towards the reader.
Yeah.
The attempt at foreshortening is definitely a valiant effort, and it's something that a lot of people won't even try because they're afraid they won't get it right.
Mm-hmm.
This one needs a little bit of work. The general theory is kind of there. You have the hands that are bigger than the rest of the body because it's the closest object to the viewer.
Right.
But the general alignment and the anatomy of everything that supports those hands is a little bit off. Perspective, that kind of thing.
Well, I can't point fingers when it comes to perspective. That's for sure.
Pointing fingers is pretty hard to draw in perspective.
That's true too.
That's not what you meant.
Well, I meant there's some lousy perspective in Spider Hag too. So
I do like that he put backgrounds in.
Mm-hmm.
His birds remind me of your armadillos. Like they're everywhere and you don't really understand why. But overall, I think, you can follow the story, so the storytelling's there.
Uh-huh.
You could use a bit more variety, and the foundation of his figures needs some work.
Mm-hmm.
But probably more understandable than the story that I did, Zombie 1.0.
Well,
You're not going, hey, what just happened?
he understands storytelling, and he's got some close-ups in good places, and yeah, I mean,
Establishing shots and
yeah, uh, like you say, yeah, just work on figures and maybe a few, more variety in viewpoints would be good.
I really don't like the colors he chose for the costume though. But that's personal preference. I don't like magenta. Yeah, I just don't like it. I don't think it belongs on a superhero's costume.
Okay. Well,
And
yeah.
it looks kind of pinkish, so I mean...
Well, in fact, hasn't there been sort of a general rule of thumb, at least in the case of DC, that heroes use primary colors and villains use secondary colors?
I'd have to think about
I
that.
remember
I
seeing
think
this somewhere, that like Superman has blue and red, and the Joker has purple, and Riddler
I
has
remember reading it
green.
in that Vertigo graphic novel
Mm-hmm.
about the guy with the disease that nobody wants to talk about.
Oh.
His genetic disease develops around age 30 or whatever. Maybe older. You remember?
Vaguely. Yeah, we
But
read
he's a
this.
writer, and he just goes through and explains like why Superman is so iconic and how he didn't want to cover Superman.
Oh, it's a bird.
It's a bird, yeah.
Yeah, Steven Seagal.
I would hazard to guess, because this is just off of the top of my head, hazard to guess that color theory was probably true in the beginning of DC Comics.
Mm-hmm.
For the simpler times, the symbolism was fairly simple.
Yeah.
But I'd have to imagine that the more complex characters that came out probably 70s, 80s, and 90s, well, even in the 2000s, or don't follow that. Swamp Thing comes to mind. He's not really a primary color.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's not
Or
really the
Hulk
the
for
hero
that matter.
archetype.
Hulk, for that matter.
Well, Hulk's Marvel, so you said it was mostly DC,
I
right?
think it was mostly DC, yeah. Although, I mean, some Marvel follows that same idea. Like Spider-Man is red and blue. Captain America, obviously.
Well, yeah. And those are both characters that are supposed to be closely associated with patriotism and being American and those kind of things. Same thing with Superman.
Yeah.
What other characters are there in the DC universe?
Well, let's see. I guess that the idea falls apart when you consider there's a Green Arrow and a Green Lantern.
True.
But Wonder Woman's red, white, and blue, and
Yellow.
Let's see. Batman's got blue, but then he's got that gray.
Yeah. Robin. Yellow, red, and green.
That's kind of mixture of primary and secondary. Anyway.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't like magenta for the simple reason that it's one of the primary process colors.
CMYK, yeah.
Right. So, to me, it always seemed like whenever I saw a lot of, and I believe I've mentioned it before, whenever I saw a lot of magenta on the page, it seemed like the publisher or the printer was kind of robbing me of some of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because they just said, well, we've got magenta. That's going to be on every page. Why don't we just color in magenta? And I think in the 80s, a lot of the books were kind of magenta heavy. What comes to mind is Batman, The Cult, which was illustrated by Bernie Wrightson. Brilliant illustrator. And I think he colored most of it himself too. But if you look at the pages, because of the limitations of the printing method, I think you see I remember we talked about like dot registration and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the prevalence of those process colors in the printed work. The dots are so big, they're so far apart that it's kind of a way to gauge the quality of a book. So I think maybe that's like a subconscious choice for me, that I would move away from magenta or flat yellow or even cyan as one of the primary colors for costume design, or even a set design if I was looking at setting a page. I'm really a fan of the really simple colors, though. I mean, with the Super Spy, the duotone idea, we saw it in the Daniel Close book too, Ghost World.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that technique, and I'm a fan of black and white too, because I think the focus is a little tighter on black and white work. And I think that's why not a whole lot of filmmakers, but, some of them would choose to go black and white because you're not distracted by all the color that's there, and it's more an emphasis of the style of the story itself. Mm-hmm. Like Clerks by Kevin Smith. Mm. The initial one was in black and white. Part of it was because they didn't have a whole lot of money. Mm-hmm. But the other part of it was, it puts you back to a simpler time because your palette is so simple that you're focusing on the characters, and you get a real sense of texture and mood and simplicity from black and white. I've been reading the new Walking Dead book that was just released, Volume 2 of the hardcover, and I really like how it's black and white. It's got gray in there to support the black and white. It's not just flat black. Mm-hmm. But for that story, it really fits in. The starkness of the world just becoming all zombies and everything. Mm-hmm. But Vincent Morris, is that his name?
Yeah, I think that's how I read the signature, yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad. His Kid Intense could use a little bit of work for improvement. I would say initially work on your anatomy once again. I would redesign the character unless it is a parody. And perspective. Anatomy, character design, and perspective. Storytelling is there.
Yeah.
And there you have it, a 9-year-old critique. Read the comic for yourself at deconstructingcomics.com/kidintense. We'll be back on Monday when Juan Mai Bush and I discuss Reinhard Kleist's The Boxer. See you then.